What if the hardest part of change is not beginning, but staying with something long enough for change to take root? Today, we are talking about trusting the process. This is the final link in successful change. In this episode, we are bringing the whole series together. We are going to look at how fresh starts, taking inventory, growth mindset, and incremental change all work together as part of a larger process of change, growth, development, and transformation. And by the end, I hope you will have a clearer, more grounded way to understand what it means to trust the process. Not as wishful thinking, not as sitting back and doing nothing, but as a way of staying faithful to the small choices, honest attention, and steady practice that shape a life over time. This is a Karen Schaal podcast where we expand the mind and grow the heart. I'm Karen Schaal. Let's get started. Human beings have always had to learn how to trust a process. Whether we like it or not, the most important things in life take time. Growth takes time. Trust, wisdom take time. This is not a flaw in the human experience. It is part of the design. We may want change to happen quickly, but the deeper parts of life rarely work that way. For most of history, people lived with visible reminders that life moves in stages. Seasons changed, children grew, skills were learned through practice. Character was shaped through daily choices. People understood that some things cannot be rushed without being weakened. I experienced this in a very practical way years ago when I was training with a group at a local YMCA. Part of the routine was running, but part of it was also strength training in the gym. And I will be honest, I tried to take shortcuts in the gym. I didn't give that part of the training the respect it deserved. I wanted the running to carry me, but I had not built the strength underneath it. And eventually, I couldn't keep up. I wasn't strong enough. That experience taught me something. When we try to cheat the process, we usually don't become stronger, we become weaker. And that is often the problem in our modern world. Instead of honoring the age-old process of how growth works, we are surrounded by speed. We want quick answers, speedy solutions, and immediate results. And if we are not careful, we begin to expect our inner lives to move at the same speed. We want the habit to feel natural right away, the difficult relationship to improve after one conversation. We want change to show up clearly, quickly, and on our timeline. But human growth doesn't work that way. The deeper work of becoming takes time. So before we go any further, we need to be clear about the word trust. Because trust the process can sound vague. It can sound passive. It can sound like some empty phrase people say. Trust doesn't mean pretending or ignoring reality. It doesn't mean sitting back and hoping things work out while we keep doing the same thing. Real trust is active. Trust means we understand enough about the process to keep participating even when we cannot see the full result yet. We may not understand every detail. We may not be able to control every outcome, but we know enough to keep showing up. That is the kind of trust we are talking about here. Grounded trust. The kind of trust that says, I will keep paying attention. I will keep making those small choices and keep returning when I get off track. And this is where many people give up too soon. They mistake slow for stuck. They mistake a quiet process for no process at all. Trusting the process is not just a comforting idea. It can be difficult because human beings naturally respond to immediate feedback. We know how that works. We like visible evidence that our effort is working. We want to feel stronger after one workout, right? Calmer after one meditation, or more confident after one difficult conversation. But many of the changes that matter most do not provide quick rewards. A healthier body, a steadier mind, a stronger relationship, or a wiser way of responding develops gradually. When the evidence is slow to appear, it's easy to assume that nothing is happening. One useful line of research comes from psychologist Walter Mischel and his colleagues. In a series of experiments involving 92 preschool-age children, the researchers offered children a smaller reward immediately or a larger reward if they waited. The important finding was not simply that some children had more willpower than others. The way children directed their attention substantially affected how long they waited. Children waited longer when they were distracted from the reward or encouraged to think about something enjoyable. They waited for less time when they focused on the reward itself. In other words, successful waiting was not only a matter of gritting their teeth, it involved managing attention. Now that gives us an important lesson about personal change. Trusting the process becomes easier when we stop constantly checking for the reward. If we examine ourselves after every workout, every meditation, or every difficult conversation and ask, is it working yet? We may intensify our frustration. Sometimes we need to move our attention away from the immediate result and back toward the next meaningful action. We take the walk before we feel stronger. We pause before responding, before calmness feels natural. We return to the practice before the practice feels rewarding. I know this again firsthand when I recently ran a half marathon. Now, this was something I was invited to do by my youngest son and had no experience and definitely no confidence. If I had waited to feel ready, it would have never happened. So I did it. I trusted the process that with the repetitive training I did, I would be able to finish, and I did. Now, this was something I would have never fathomed being possible at any time in my life. My results were in line with research showing that self-regulation is supported by the strategies we use and the conditions around us. Let me repeat that. Self-regulation is supported by the strategies we use and the conditions around us. My self-regulation came in following a training plan, and I had people supporting me and cheering me on all the way. A second helpful finding comes from a large meta-analysis on monitoring progress. They studied a lot of people, a lot of studies. The researchers examined 138 randomized studies involving over 19,900 participants. Interventions that encourage people to monitor their progress produced a moderate improvement in goal attainment. The effect was stronger when people physically recorded their progress or reported it to someone else. Now, this may sound contradictory. Should we stop looking for results, or should we monitor our progress? The distinction is between monitoring the process and demanding constant proof of the outcome. Checking every day to see whether you have completely transformed, of course, creates discouragement. Recording whether you practiced, showed up, or took the next step can build trust. Instead of asking, have I arrived? Am I done yet? Am I there yet? Right? Ask yourself, did I participate in what I needed to do today to reach my goal? That is a much more useful question. Change may be taking place before it becomes obvious. A new response may be getting stronger. An old habit may be losing some of its pull on us. You may be recovering more quickly after a setback, after a workout, noticing your reactions earlier, or making a better choice 1 time out of 5 instead of 1 time out of 10. The science helps us understand both sides of the experience. We become discouraged when rewards are delayed, especially when we repeatedly focus on what has not happened yet. At the same time, we can strengthen persistence by guiding our attention and recording the actions that are within our control. Trusting the process doesn't mean assuming that every approach will eventually work. Not at all. A process should still be evaluated and adjusted. This is important. Trust means giving a thoughtful practice enough time and enough consistency to produce meaningful evidence before we decide that it's failed. It means remaining patient without becoming passive. It means paying attention to the direction of change, not only the distance still left to travel. So how do we practice trusting the process? How do we take this idea out of a podcast and bring it into daily life, into the difficult conversation, into the moment when the old pattern seriously wants to take over? I want to give you a few practices, not a big list here, just a few places you can begin. The first practice is appreciation to care. Each morning, ask yourself, what is one thing I appreciate about my life today? Then ask yourself this, if I truly appreciate this, how can I care for it? That is the important part. Appreciation should lead somewhere. Maybe you appreciate that your body has carried you through a difficult season. Care might look like taking a 10-minute walk. Maybe you appreciate that your mind is still capable of learning. I'm very appreciative of that. Care might look like reading something nourishing instead of starting the day with endless scrolling. It's nurturing what we've already received and caring for it in a special way. This practice matters because it turns gratitude into action. It says, if I appreciate this life, if I appreciate this behavior, how can I care for it? The second practice is the self-evidence journal. At the end of the day, write one sentence about where you saw small progress being made. Proof that everything is fixed. Evidence. Maybe you paused before responding. Maybe you returned back to your workout after a hard moment. Maybe it was one small step that you did when you wanted to quit. This trains your mind to see the signs of growth you might otherwise miss, because remember, change is incremental, it's small. Because if you only look for dramatic change, we're going to miss the quiet evidence that the process is working. The third practice is the lazy river reminder. When you feel impatient with your growth, picture the lazy river, just slowly moving along. Remind yourself that there's movement even when I can't really see it moving much at all. There's activity beneath the surface. The process is not empty. My choices are giving direction. This image of the lazy river can help us stop panicking when change feels slow. Because remember, slow doesn't mean stagnant. Slow may mean deep. Deep things happening under the surface. And the fourth point is to pause and ask yourself, what choice would care for my future self look like? That distinction matters. We're not trying to bully ourselves into change. We're trying to love ourselves into alignment. Maybe your future self needs you to take the walk. Maybe your future self needs you to put the phone down. Maybe your future self needs you to finally begin. This question brings responsibility and care together in a meaningful way. It says, I appreciate the life ahead of me enough to care for it now. And the fifth practice is a return practice. Everybody's going to get off track. It happens. It happens all the time, right? Your return phrase might be to get back on track. I'm beginning again. It's a process. It's not failure. One missed day is not a ruined life. The point is to make returning part of the process, because it is. Because trusting the process doesn't mean never drifting or never stopping or never thinking you can't get it done. What it is also is learning to come back. And that may be one of the most important lessons in this whole series. We do not build a life through one grand decision. We build it through returning to attention, returning to care, returning to the next small choice, returning to what matters. So here we are at the end of this spring series, and I want to bring it all together. Fresh starts reminded us that new beginnings are available always, those Mondays. Taking inventory helped us step out onto the balcony of our lives and take inventory, look honestly at what is happening. Growth mindset reminded us that we are not frozen, and growth is still available to the willing at any time. Incremental change taught us that change unfolds through small choices repeated with patience over time. And trusting the process reminds us that once we begin, we have to stay with the slow work of becoming. This is not about arriving all at once. It's about formation. It's about paying attention, practicing patience, understanding trust, and returning to the small choices that shape a life. That's a noble calling, to grow into the fullness of who we were meant to be, to grow into our brilliance. And I know that word may feel big, brilliance, but maybe you don't yet know the greatness of who you are. Maybe you have only seen yourself through the framework of exhaustion, disappointment, comparison, fear, survival. Maybe you have only known pieces of yourself, but there's more, there's always more. Your small choices toward goodness matter. Your small choices toward health matter, toward gratitude matter. They may not feel dramatic today, but they are giving direction to your life. They are guiding the river. They are strengthening the pathway. And no, you may not see the whole view yet. You won't. But keep going. Trust the process. Not because it's easy, not because it's instant, not because you will always feel motivated, because you won't. But because growth is possible. Because change has always been possible. Because modern research reminds us that the brain and body can adapt. Attention can be trained. Care can be practiced. Small choices repeated over time can become a life. So as we close this spring series, I want to leave you with the question: what is one thing in your life that is worthy of appreciation? And how can you care for it today? Start there. One notice, one choice, one practice, one return to caring for yourself. The process, remember, may be slow, but again, slow does not mean nothing is happening. The river is moving, the mind is learning, the heart is softening, the body is listening. If this spring series has encouraged you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who may need the reminder that growth is still possible. This is the Karen Schaal podcast, where we expand the mind and grow the heart. I'm Karen Schaal. See you next time. Bye-bye.